Tonight, hunkering down, states start to shut borders and non-essential services. Another huge cash injection to try to cushion the economic blow as the Premier urges us all to keep our distance.
I need everyone to do this, okay? No, we're not starting until you properly social distance, everybody.
How Queensland coastal communities are preparing for sea level rises. And game over. Coronavirus causes the AFL season to be suspended. Good evening, Jessica Van Vonderen with ABC News Sunday. Life is about to change profoundly. Lockdowns are being planned across the country, with several states wanting to close schools, bars and restaurants in an effort to fight the spread of the coronavirus. The New South Wales and Victorian governments are both moving to shut down their states within the next 2 days. The Prime Minister today asked Australians to cancel all non-essential domestic travel, and he announced a second economic stimulus package worth $66 billion. It includes increased job seeker and welfare payments, funding for small and medium businesses, and early access to superannuation for people in financial stress. But it was overshadowed with news that some states were moving into lockdown. The Prime Minister is currently in a phone hookup with the premiers. From Canberra, here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
Facing a crisis that defies comprehension, Scott Morrison has become a wartime Prime Minister.
We cannot prevent all the many hardships, all the many sacrifices that we will face in the months ahead.
Every Australian is to be conscripted to the fight, young, old, fit and infirm.
It is very serious. It is deadly serious. And that's why I would appeal to them that they all have a role to play. People cannot be cavalier about these things.
Some people appear incapable or unwilling to heed the pleas or listen to the advice about social distancing. The Prime Minister warning it'll be forced on them.
State premiers and chief ministers may have to take far more draconian measures to enforce social distancing, particularly in areas of outbreaks.
And that's coming very soon. New South Wales and Victoria announcing a comprehensive shutdown of non-essential services. Over the next 48 hours, pubs, clubs, restaurants and some workplaces will be closed. Victoria will close schools from Tuesday. Other states and territories are expected to follow. So a lockdown looms, one that'll go for months.
There is no 2-week quick fix. There is no 4-week shutdown and it all goes away.
Exempt from shutdowns will be supermarkets, banks, pharmacies and petrol stations. Freight and home delivery will also continue. WA will turn some hotels into places of forced isolation for uncooperative coronavirus victims, while popular Rottnest Island will become a place for quarantine.
Western Australia is now in a war, the type of war we have never seen before.
Some states and territories are already closing borders amid strong advice to abandon non-essential travel.
It does mean those holidays that you might have been planning to take interstate over the school holidays, cancel them.
Some of these arrangements will be formalised during a hookup of state and federal leaders tonight. With Australia now on a war footing against an invisible enemy, consistency across jurisdictions is going to be important. New South Wales and Victoria know this and have forced the hand of National Cabinet. So expect schools and non-essential services across Australia to close this week. The country's resilience will be tested.
Together, Australia, we will get through this and we will emerge stronger. Thank you.
The nation hopes he's right. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
The government is supercharging its safety net, boosting the unemployment benefit and giving some Australians early access to their super. Businesses will also be given cash to keep staff employed as part of a massive $66 billion package. Political reporter Jane Norman explains.
Framed as a safety net package, this second round of spending is less about stimulus and more about putting the economy on life support. An extra $66 billion to be spent propping up businesses while helping the many thousands of Australians who will lose their jobs.
It's focusing on those who are going to feel the first blows.
Those already on or soon to be on income support will get a massive boost, $550 a fortnight on top of the renamed New Start allowance. It's a temporary fix for anyone who finds themselves out of work, including sole traders and casuals.
This means anyone eligible for the maximum job seeker payment will now receive more than $1,100 a fortnight, effectively doubling the job seeker allowance.
Concession card holders and those receiving other assistance, including family tax benefits, the age pension and disability support pension, will be eligible for a $750 cash payment. That's on top of the handout announced in the first stimulus package, helping
in total 5.2 million Australians.
The most contentious measure, allowing those in financial stress to tap into their nest egg now. The government's giving eligible Australians early access to their superannuation, $10,000 this financial year and another $10,000 the next, all tax-free.
This is the people's money, and this is the time they need it most.
Billions will flow for businesses too. Small and medium businesses and charities with a turnover of up to $50 million will have access to cash payments of up to $100,000 to retain staff during the crisis. The government's also going part guarantor for unsecured loans of up to $250,000.
Labor has taken an approach to these issues that we will be constructive. We will be supportive of these measures.
That means this package and the one announced just 10 days ago will be legislated when Parliament resumes tomorrow. Combined with the Reserve Bank's intervention, it brings the total spend to $189 billion, a staggering figure that's likely to be a down payment on what's to come.
In Queensland, $17 million is being spent to fast-track a possible vaccine for coronavirus. But the Premier warns that's a long-term solution, and she says the public needs to wake up to the threat now. A short time ago, major theme parks on the Gold Coast announced they're temporarily closing.
38 new cases of COVID-19 in Queensland, the total now 259. They're concentrated in the southeast and mainly in those recently returned from overseas.
There's people out there that think this is not going to happen to us. Wake up, it is.
As the blame game continues around how cruise ship passengers were allowed to freely disembark, Queensland woman Dorothy Keane's sister and niece today tested positive after returning on the Voyager of the Seas cruise ship last Wednesday. Her brother-in-law remains on life support at Toowoomba Base Hospital.
The family can't be there, and if something happens, he passes, they can't be with him. It's not just the flu, it's infected all his organs.
In Brisbane, pubs and clubs over the weekend have been subdued. The Premier thanked people for staying home and is herself strictly enforcing the rules.
No, we're not starting until you properly social distance, everybody.
She says people should prepare for greater social restrictions, with the hardest days still ahead.
There are going to be tougher measures. I know that there's going to be tougher measures over the days and weeks to come.
On any normal Sunday, this would be packed with people, but here at South Bank Parklands, people largely seem to be following the rules of social distancing.
To enforce the rules, liquor licensing inspectors and police have been given extra powers to fine people under the public health emergency order.
At the moment, yeah, it's not a person. It's a ghost town. It's weird.
People who are out seem pretty chill, but yeah, there's not many of them.
At Burleigh on the Gold Coast, many beachgoers stayed away, but patrons at nearby Rick Shaw's restaurant weren't deterred despite a diner testing positive. He spent 90 minutes having lunch there on the 13th of March.
Our teams are working hard to contact everyone who's been in touch with anyone who has been confirmed as a positive case.
Anyone who had eaten there before or in the 9 days since shouldn't be worried. For avid readers, panic buying turned to panic borrowing, with 33 libraries across Brisbane to close from tomorrow.
Libraries closing today, and everyone wants to just read, to do something if Australia goes into lockdown.
The state government has given $17 million to University of Queensland researchers. There's no guarantee of success, but all stops are being pulled out to have a vaccine to market in 12 months.
This is going to be technically very, very challenging, but this funding lets us push forward in a way that we wouldn't have dreamed possible just a few weeks ago.
A vaccine that could save lives. Stephanie Zillman, ABC News.
A couple who got sick after being on board the Ruby Princess cruise ship say it should never have been allowed to sail. The same ship had just returned from a cruise during which 158 people reported feeling sick. 26 confirmed cases of COVID-19 have now been linked to the Ruby Princess. Martin and Leslie Kerr were told by staff no one had been sick on board the previous cruise. When they disembarked, they travelled home to Melbourne by train and plane, where Mrs Kerr tested positive. Her husband's results are pending.
Getting off the ship has been a huge bonus to us. Should we have been allowed? I don't think so, until they got a couple of results back, and if they were positive, then no, we should still be on the ship. But I'm glad I'm home.
Crew of the Ruby Princess are quarantined on board the ship, which is floating off the coast of Wollongong. New travel restrictions have prompted the AFL to suspend its men's season until the end of May and call an end to this year's AFLW competition. The future of the A-League season is still under a cloud, but Rugby League says it will play on.
Australian sport was turned on its head today.
The AFL has moved to immediately suspend the 2020 Toyota AFL Premiership season.
With non-essential travel cancelled and borders closing in South Australia and Western Australia, the season was slipping away. News started to filter in during games.
So let's enjoy it while we've got it.
Then it was official. The AFL postponed until at least April, while the AFLW season declared over with no premiership winner.
To say that this is the most serious threat to our game in 100 years is an understatement.
The tightened restrictions also spell trouble for football. The FFA says it is assessing the ongoing operations of the A-League. Rugby League fans didn't exactly heed the health warnings today. The NRL is hoping the non-essential travel recommendation won't apply to its competition.
We're using chartered flights, we're not using the normal commercial domestic planes. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to travel.
They'll learn more after this evening's National Cabinet meeting.
And I'm gathering what happens there is going to be the decider whether the NRL goes forward and plays any games.
It may be the last game standing. Peter Lusted, ABC News.
Lots of Australians are working from home in a bid to slow the spread of coronavirus. But while we're doing that, we're being warned to pay more attention to cybersecurity.
Coronavirus is disrupting society in profound ways, and cyber criminals are positioned to benefit.
People stressed, doing things quickly in a panic mode, that's a great time for a cyber criminal to come in and you're just not concentrating and you click on the wrong link and whammo, everything can be gone.
Hackers are using COVID-themed emails and text messages to steal things like private information and banking details. This text message, purporting to be from the government, is just one of those doing the rounds.
I think there is an uptick. I'd be suggesting right now people be cyber alert but not cyber alarmed.
Australia's Cyber Spy Agency wants people to stay ahead of the scammers, with one industry in particular told to watch out.
Obviously, we need to make sure that people in the health sector are paying really good attention to their cybersecurity because they are of increasing criticality across society.
All industries are vulnerable, but you just know that people are going to target the area where people are going the most. So you can imagine health, banking, people looking at their superannuation funds.
Just like good hand hygiene, good cyber hygiene can keep a virus at bay.
When we know there could be increased opportunism from bad actors, organisations are all being encouraged to just ensure that basic hygiene's in place. Patch your servers, make sure that you're paying attention to the advice we put out on cyber.gov.au.
While money scams are the biggest risk for small business and people working from home, larger organisations are bracing for acts of cyber espionage. Cybersecurity firms around the world are reporting instances of state-sponsored hacking, some targeting officials with booby-trapped documents pretending to be about coronavirus. The global thirst for information is also the perfect petri dish for disinformation campaigns. Experts are warning people not to swallow social media content without question. The advice to avoid infection is simple. Wash your hands and think before you click. Siobhan Henu, ABC News.
Like nearly everyone, religious organisations have had to take drastic measures to keep people safe. Today, worshippers across the country watched services online from their homes.
Hundreds of people would usually fill St Andrew's Cathedral on a Sunday morning. Today, the choir sang, but the pews sat empty.
In times of uncertainty, of anxiety and fearfulness, where can we turn?
The church has turned to the internet.
For this time, in order to play our part in the community, combating this disease, we've taken this unusual step.
Good morning, everyone.
Across Australia, Sunday service has been brought into the living room.
There's a sense of grief in our community and unknownness about the future. We have no idea how long we'll be doing this.
Yeah, we haven't had a church service at our dining table before. It's kind of a nice way of doing church when we can't actually be there in person.
It's not just faith that's being live streamed, but also funerals.
We have offered live streaming, but all of a sudden it's become an intrinsic part of each celebration.
For the family of Alan McIndoe, the online webcast was the only option.
My sister's devastated. She really, really wanted to be here.
Her sister Kylie has a respiratory illness, while his siblings live interstate, unable to travel.
People, being close together at a time when they're grieving and they might, feel like they need a bit of human comfort, that's just not possible.
Pews were wiped down and elbow bumps replaced hugs.
Life and love doesn't stop and death doesn't stop.
But under a shutdown, it's uncertain when memorials will be able to take place. Alison Shao, ABC News.
Later this hour, a special program presented by Insider's host David Spears.
After the news tonight, I'll be interviewing the Prime Minister about the planned shutdowns and how the government's managing these extreme challenges. How will this new $66 billion rescue package work? As well as speaking to Scott Morrison, we'll talk to the sectors hardest hit by this unprecedented crisis.
The death toll continues to rise dramatically in Italy. In the worst-hit region of Lombardy, all sport and physical activity has been banned outside, even if you're on your own. Italy has the world's highest death toll, and another 800 people died there on Saturday. The number of infections in Spain also jumped by 30%, and that country's Prime Minister says the worst is yet to come. While Germany now has around 3,000 new cases a day. Bars and clubs are no longer allowed to open and restaurants must close at 6 p.m. In Britain, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned coronavirus will overwhelm the NHS unless everyone starts to practice social distancing and the vulnerable stay at home. He estimates the UK is 3 weeks behind Italy in terms of the pandemic, with more than 230 deaths. Well, the United States is ramping up production of protective gear. With more than 26,000 confirmed coronavirus cases to date, healthcare workers are struggling with dwindling supplies. New York City is one of the hardest hit places. It'll be setting up field hospitals to treat the sick. North America correspondent James Glenday reports.
In emergency rooms across America, doctors are now preparing for the worst.
There's absolutely fear in the unknown, and as we see these numbers grow, it's very anxiety-inducing.
Due to a critical shortage of protective equipment, they're having to improvise to shield themselves from an unseen enemy.
My mask snapped while I was trying to take it off in between patients, and I had to staple it back.
Hey, your surgery's in OR4.
The actors from TV series Grey's Anatomy have donated their medical props to hospitals struggling with supplies.
You rock. We love you. Stay safe.
Some distilleries are shifting gears to produce hand sanitizer.
We normally use this still for gin production.
And several governors have been scouring the globe for extra gowns, gloves, masks and ventilators.
We're working on every level. Every piston is firing. Everything that can be done is being done.
But it could be some time before supply meets demand, so health officials in the hardest hit areas are trying to conserve what they can, urging Americans with mild cases to manage their symptoms alone.
Not every single person in the United States needs to get tested.
The Vice President is one exception to that rule. He was tested after a staff member fell ill. But for everyone else, social distancing is deemed the best measure. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans has now been told to stay home.
Because we all are potential transmitters of this virus, and we all, to some varying degree, are potential victims of this virus.
In Miami, hotels are being closed to ensure spring break partygoers get off the beaches. In California, one drive-through cinema has seen a spike in popularity, and in Maryland, drive-through confession was offered to worshippers. Here in Washington, the president's been repeatedly quizzed about why he didn't move sooner to try to stem this outbreak, and reacted angrily when it was suggested he'd badly mishandled things. Donald Trump claims reporters should instead be focused on his economic stimulus package.
It's so insulting when they write phony stories that they know are fake news.
His long-promised spending bill is still tied up in negotiations, though could pass on Monday. For many businesses who are already laying off staff, it can't come soon enough. James Glenday, ABC News, Washington.
Life in some parts of China is returning to normal, but there's been a slight rebound in COVID-19 cases. The government claims it's almost managed to stop the spread. Here's China correspondent Bill Birtles.
While many countries have closed their borders, China's kept them open. But flying into the country is now an ordeal. Hours of temperature checks and paperwork before being bussed to quarantine hotels to spend 2 weeks locked in. In the city where the global pandemic started, there are signs of hope. Chinese figures are hard to verify, but the government claims there hasn't been a single new infection in Wuhan for 4 days. If that's true, the drop-off in new cases across China is a remarkable sign that strict measures do work. From a peak in February, the government claimed it had got down to just a handful of new cases last week. But now it's rising again, with dozens of incoming passengers each day bringing the virus with them. Here in Beijing, you get your temperature taken everywhere, but the streets are really bouncing back to life. Bars, cafes and shops are now all open. And the government has even dropped an order to wear face masks outside.
We went through the panic when the outbreak started, but we're slowly getting back to normal.
I'm still wearing a mask because even though things are better here, the outbreak is severe overseas.
Had China been able to contain the original outbreak earlier, its strategy to quash the virus completely may have worked. But with so many infections among citizens returning from abroad, it will need to keep up its border vigilance for a very long time. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Beijing.
Panic buying and social distancing are making it hard for charities that help the homeless. In Ipswich, providers are having to suspend weekly meal nights as volunteers isolate and food becomes more scarce.
This food is given out to feed the most vulnerable and disadvantaged. But panic buying is making it hard for charities to provide for the homeless.
I can see that some marginalised people are going to do it really tough. Things are going to get very serious. Who knows where it's going to lead to, but it's going to get bad.
At this Ipswich Park, those who sleep rough gather to wash their clothes and get a meal. But volunteer Nancy Panapa packs up. Perhaps for the last time, due to a lack of supplies.
There's nothing out there. People are I believe that just over hoarding.
5 services have suspended hot meal distribution in Ipswich due to coronavirus. Just a couple remain.
We haven't seen any of, the butchers or the supermarkets or anyone like that come out and say, hey, we can help. I guess everybody's just fending for themselves.
Volunteers say a lack of options to keep clean makes those living on the street particularly vulnerable to the virus.
About 20,000 Queenslanders are currently homeless.
The Housing Minister says he's in talks with specialist housing providers about possible solutions. But advocates are concerned that those sleeping rough will end up sick and in hospital.
Fears social distancing could become social isolation. Baz Ruddick, ABC News, Ipswich.
To other news now. It's predicted that by the end of the century, global sea levels will have risen by as much as a metre. With 85% of the population living on or near the coast, many communities are starting to plan for frequent flooding, severe coastal erosion, loss of beaches and higher storm surges. Modelling based on IPCC predictions shows 14 mainland coastal communities are particularly vulnerable to sea level rise. 4 of them are in Queensland, including Port Douglas, Cairns and the Sunshine Coast. But the Gold Coast's location and large population mean it faces some particular challenges. Daya Clark has this week's special report.
7 months after moving in, Rolly Green is already clearing out the shed in the backyard of his home on the northern Gold Coast.
The water is coming down the street and then the drains aren't quite good enough, so then it pools around here, then comes into the yard.
The Jacobs Well property was one of many across the Gold Coast which flooded when record rainfall drenched the region in February. Fortunately, the rain didn't coincide with a king tide, which would have pushed water levels higher as drains backed up.
The only reason I bought this place is because it's about a metre off the ground.
But climate scientists are concerned a metre may not be enough to protect Rolly Green's house in the future. In its most conservative scenario, the International Panel on Climate Change says global sea levels will rise by as much as 60 centimetres by the end of the century. The predictions are worse if global temperatures rise beyond 2 degrees.
Broadly, what we're kind of planning towards is something in that 80 centimetre to 1 metre range.
Mapping company NGIS Australia modelled the impact on coastal communities by using the current highest tide and then adding 74 centimetres of sea level rise.
Southeast Australia and some other places towards the northwest are global hotspots of sea level rise.
The mapping shows one of Australia's premier tourist destinations, the Gold Coast, would be hard hit.
It's a massive amount of water that's all of a sudden impacting on the coast. And so the beach will respond to that by eroding back towards dunes if they're available. But if they're not, it will go into homes, infrastructure, roads.
Dubbed the last line of defence, a boulder wall concealed behind sand dunes stretches along most of the developed shoreline. Combined with sand replenishment, it's an integral part of beach management on the Gold Coast.
With higher sea levels, those defences start being overtopped and you start creating damage in a lot of the kind of iconic buildings of the Gold Coast that are currently standing behind me. So they could be at risk.
The impacts will also be felt inland. Kate Madison owns a popular cafe at Surfers Paradise near Budds Beach, a sandy retreat on the Nerang River. It's a low-lying area and on a king tide, water rises through the drains.
It's just you've got to drive your car through this salty water. So I think we all get a bit concerned about that.
Add 80 centimetres of sea level rise and it becomes more than a mere inconvenience.
Just looking around here, there's not one property that wouldn't be devastated.
As part of a campaign to raise awareness, the environmental group Gecko engaged a surveyor to map out the impact on a park at Currumbin.
But we took the king tides that come through and add 0.8 of a metre, and it comes to the bottom of these horizontal logs here, and that covers across all the park, out across the road and laps up against the houses on the far side of the road.
More than 500,000 people call the Gold Coast home, and that figure is forecast to grow by another 350,000 in the next 20 years. Development sites are at a premium, some on floodplains.
Where myself and a lot of other lawyers see the litigation risk being in the future is against local governments for approving developments in hazard areas.
The local council is incorporating an 80 centimetre sea level rise into its mapping as part of the city plan.
There are, for example, regulations, and if you buy now land in flooding areas, the land has to be elevated already.
The Gold Coast City Council told the ABC no one was available for interview, but in a statement pointed to a number of measures it's already undertaken, including the installation of an artificial reef off Palm Beach. It's one of the measures designed to protect the beach from erosion. Griffith University's Professor Jörg Bormeister has been working with the Council on Adaptation Strategies and says it's important to act now.
We have to start to think now strategically, and that costs a little bit money, but the earlier we are starting to prepare ourselves, the better it is.
While authorities grapple with the problem, residents are left wondering.
If we've got to leave here because of that reason, how do you sell your house?
Scientists say it's a tomorrow problem that must be tackled today. Daya Clark, ABC News, Gold Coast.
Dogs might be considered man's best friend, but on farms they're also valuable workers. Some of the best dog handlers have been competing at the National Championships in South Australia.
25-year-old Bree Cudmore is competing at the Australian Yard Dog Championships in Lucendale with her best mate and colleague.
So this is Marista Zoe. She's my first ever dog. She's a sensational little dog. She's done extremely well for me in the trials and got me where I am today.
She's one of many young people at the event. With nearly half the competitors aged 25 or under, this is a skill set that's thriving.
Owners of properties see the value of the dogs and what they can do, and if a young person has got a good young team of dogs, they'll get a job quicker than someone who hasn't got a dog at all.
23-year-old Josh Megson's 4 working Kelpies have helped him find work.
It gives me the options of not having to have as many people in the yards or being able to go out into a paddock by yourself and bring in a mob by yourself.
So, who's training who?
I've been told by some more experienced people that certain dogs of mine actually know stock better than I do at this stage. And it's 100% true.
These dogs are working professionals and they don't come cheap. An untrained pup can cost $700, but the best of the best can cost tens of thousands of dollars, making them a major investment for young people looking to get ahead.
It's like, working with your best friend, really, for me. These are my best friends. And they still love me at the end of the day, even if I've worked them all day.
Teaching young farmers new tricks. Bridget Herman, ABC News, Lucendale. Time for a quick look at Queensland's weather with Jenny Woodward.
Thanks, Jess. Hello, everyone. Well, a very heavy rain we expected in the tropics hasn't eventuated as the upper system weakened as it moved towards the coast. There's been plenty of cloud, but much smaller totals. Up to 9 a.m, the heavier falls of 50 to 60 millimetres were around Innisfail. South Johnson had 65, and in the Daintree, beds picked up 56. Today, much lighter falls, 18 millimetres the highest. That was at the Tongue Oil site in Innisfail. Now, the cloudy skies will persist there for the week, but much lighter falls, but there's still the potential for accumulations of 150 millimetres, and those odd storms could bring isolated heavy totals too. I'll have all the forecasts shortly. Jess.
Thanks, Jenny. In the NRL, it was a performance to forget from the Gold Coast Titans, who were comprehensively outclassed by the Parramatta Eels, losing 46 points to 6 on the Gold Coast. Mitchell Moses scored a terrific individual try that saw the Eels race to an early lead. The Gold Coast hit back through Daly Copley, but he was injured grounding the ball. That saw Parramatta lock Nathan Brown placed on report. The Titans' ball control was woeful and the Eels made them pay.
Evans with the basketball pass, Dylan Brown spinning and he finds a way in.
If the competition continues, the Titans will face the Broncos next Sunday. Night skipper Mitchell Pearce has steered his side to a comfortable 42 to 24 points win over the Tigers. Newcastle ran in 8 tries and remain undefeated this season.
The Knights travelled to the Tigers' spiritual home where the fans were locked out but couldn't stay away.
Balconies, standing on milk crates to look over the fence.
And Newcastle were quick off the mark with 2 tries.
Right little grubber into the in-goal area.
Gaping holes in West's defence led to Newcastle's 3rd try, and the visitors led by 6 points at the break. A well-placed bomb provided an opportunity for Edric Lee.
What a take! Edric!
The Tigers narrowed the margin to 2 points, before Newcastle finished with a flurry, piling on 3 unanswered tries.
He deserves a try.
The Knights maintained their unbeaten start to the season with the 42 points to 24 win. Last night, the Storm defeated the Sharks at Cogra 12 points to 10. Cronulla was up by 2 points after a tryless first half. Both teams picked up the pace in the second half. Utility Billy Magoulas scored the Sharks' only try before the Storm answered.
Row a quick play, the ball, Kamikamica, just like that.
And with 4 minutes left, Cronulla gave away a penalty and Cameron Smith delivered Melbourne its second win from as many games this season. Chloe Hart, ABC News.
On the last day of the AFL for at least 2 months, the Brisbane Lions suffered a 28-point loss to the Hawks. In the other game, North Melbourne staged a second-half fight-back.
St Kilda started strongly with debutant Max King making an early impression.
Wearing Nick Riewoldt, number 12, from the old King to the new King, kicks his first goal on AFL footy.
The Saints ruled in most departments and led by 29 points at half-time.
So he's got a fair bit on it. It's sailing, it's sailed all the way home.
But it wasn't smooth sailing for St Kilda in the third term as North Melbourne made its move. By three-quarter time, the Kangaroos were within striking distance.
Larky bangs it long, it's bending, it's bending.
North hit the front for the first time with 9 minutes to go.
And they're like an unstoppable train right now.
The Kangaroos held on to win by 2 points.
But it could be the last day of footy we get for a while. We've got a classic.
Hawthorn and Brisbane started their game with speculation swirling that it would be their last hit out for months.
Shot lines get their second.
The Hawks found open space and ran away to a 9-point lead at the long break.
And he will cruise in. The easiest goal we could ever possibly imagine.
There may not have been a crowd or a next week, but Hawthorn coach Alastair Clarkson was maintaining the intensity. Hawthorn steadied through the persistence of Sean Burgoyne.
And just did what he does better than anyone else. The Silks got 3.
Any remaining resistance from the Lions was shrugged off by the Hawks on their way to a 28-point win, and even the hardest markers couldn't help smiling. Duncan Huntsdale, ABC News.
Carlton defeated the Brisbane Lions by 29 points in the AFLW semi-finals before today's announcement that the season has been cancelled. The Blues trailed early before taking the lead in the second term. Strong defence restricted Brisbane's scoring opportunities. The Lions were given some hope when Jesse Wardlaw converted a free kick in front before Carlton sealed the win.
Falcon, it spills to G, off to McAvoy. Flying shot at goal is good, and the Blues will get a late one.
Blues forward Taylor Harris was placed on report in the third term for a sling tackle. Weather now with Jenny Woodward.
Hello again. Well, apart from the rain areas in the tropics, the rest of the state's been fine and sunny with temperatures above average in the south. Birdsville and Urandangi hit 38 this afternoon. It was 31 in Toowoomba, which was 5 above, 30 for Gladstone and Mackay, while Kingaroy and Applethorpe were the coolest this morning on just 14 degrees. Well, the early cloud cover in the city burnt off as the sun came out, 32 the top, 33 to 34 in the west, only 29, however, at Redland, and currently we're sitting on 25 degrees. Onto the satellite, and we've got some storms in this cloud cover over the southwest of the continent, while there's a shallow trough moving over Victoria and New South Wales. Also some storms about in Darwin, and it's going to be much the same again tomorrow with a top of 33. Cooler days ahead in the southeast, but it will warm up a little bit later in the week. But tomorrow just 18 for Melbourne and Hobart, while Sydney's heading for 22 with a few showers. To the chart, and the conditions will ease in the north, although the cloud and showers will linger for most of the week. There could be some storms too, but they are more likely up on the Cape. We're going to see a southerly surge moving up the coast, so slightly cooler conditions ahead. And meanwhile, an upper trough is moving in from the southwest, and along with that surface line, we'll see some showers and storms later in the week. They'll move across and reach the southeast coast on Thursday. Let's check forecast for tomorrow, and still a flood watch from Cooktown to Ingham. Showers and or storms about, more likely about the Cape and the North Tropical Coast. 31 the top for Cairns and Townsville. Mostly sunny through the northwest. A sunny day through the southern and most central parts. There is the chance of a storm towards the north there. 37 expected in Winton, and we've got a top of 33 for Roma. There's the chance of showers and possibly a thunderstorm about the southeast, Wide Bay, also into the Downs and Granite Belt. Much cooler for Toowoomba, just 25 degrees expected tomorrow, 23 for Applethorpe, but up to 30 along the east coast. There's a medium chance of showers in Brisbane and Ipswich. Southeasterly winds will be picking up through the day, up to 40 kilometres an hour, 21 to 28 in the city, and it'll be just a little bit warmer to the west with the chance of a shower. On the bay, southerly winds 10 to 15 knots in the morning, tending southeasterly to 25 knots in the middle of the day. Looking ahead, showers possible for most of the week, and we could see a storm on Thursday. That's the weather. Back to you, Jess.
Thanks, Jenny. And that is ABC News for now. Thank you for joining us. David Spears is here now with a special program on coronavirus. He has an interview with the Prime Minister, full analysis of what shutdowns will mean, and examine the way ahead as our way of life changes dramatically. Take care.